Just as its name suggests, the entire inquiry-based learning, or IBL process, begins with a question. That question should ideally come from the students, but it could also be created by the teacher or collaboratively between the teacher and students. The question itself needs to be open-ended. It should invite students to explore, to think deeply and critically, and it will often lead to more questions. Most importantly, the question should come from a student's genuine curiosity. This is where student motivation and engagement come from, both key characteristics of an IBL classroom. Like every other stage of this process, the degree of student autonomy and teacher intervention will depend on each student's ability and comfort. Inquiry-based learning is generally described as a fluid and dynamic process, depending very much on the interactions in the classroom and the teacher's ability to facilitate learning. That ability involves knowing when to intervene and guide a student or group of students through a potential stumbling block, and when to sit back and offer encouragement, but allow students to work through problems and obstacles on their own. In general, IBL is depicted as existing on a continuum from structured or guided on one end, in which learners rely heavily upon teacher assistance, to open on the other end, in which students proceed independently. The goal is for teachers to gradually transfer responsibility for each stage of the process to the students, so the students eventually become confident and independent learners. IBL can be divided roughly into three types: project-based learning, problem-based learning, and design-based learning. It is the student's question that determines which type of process is required, as well as its end goal or product. A project-based learning approach is driven by an open-ended question and will often result in the sharing of a realistic product, event, or presentation. A problem-based approach is similar, except that it is driven by a real-world problem with the end goal of sharing a strategy for its solution. Finally, a question that drives a design-based approach requires students to create and share an artifact. Regardless of which type of IBL is taking place, once the learning question is established, the students must engage in research. The type of research students do will depend on their question, and the teacher might have to help them make decisions about the most appropriate ways to gather the information that they need. Students will learn how to filter through mass amounts of information, critically analyze sources and data, identify potential biases, and organize their research. Again, the amount and type of teacher intervention in this process will depend on each student's skill level. In some cases, students gather information from books and articles, often online, and through videos and podcasts. Sometimes the research stage involves conducting surveys or gathering photographic evidence or participating in field trips. In other cases, it's at this stage that students plan and carry out different experiments, or plan, implement, and reassess design ideas. Almost always, the research stage involves collaboration, with students sharing their ideas and helping each other to improve. Once students have gathered the information they need, it's time for them to analyze and synthesize their evidence. They will need to look for themes, trends, patterns, and similarities in their data, as well as evidence that contradicts or doesn't quite fit with the rest of the information gathered. This is where students might use organizational charts, like mind maps or compare and contrast diagrams, to help them identify gaps in their research and reach conclusions about what they have learned. Though challenging, this stage can also be deeply creative, as students take ownership of something entirely new that they have built out of all the information they've taken in. From the outset, students should be aware of their end goal. Are they working towards a group presentation to the class, or a poster board event for parents and community members to attend? Are they handing in a research essay or displaying photo essays around the school? Are they publishing their work on the class website or in a local newspaper? There are a multitude of creative and interesting ways for students to share their work, but it is important to remember that a common feature of the IBL approach is for that sharing to be relevant and authentic. Finally, students should be given the time throughout the process and at the end to reflect upon their learning, to identify strengths and weaknesses in their thinking, to be aware of changes in their own ideas, to establish goals for improvement, and to identify further questions that might help them dig deeper into the issue at hand. It is always possible that one of these questions might become the source of yet another inquiry.